Welcome everyone to this Q&A on the Belgian Grand Prix. What a race. Oh my god, who would have predicted a Mercedes 1-2 before a certain disqualification was issued out to George Russell? But if you look before the checkered flag, what a race from those two. Who would have expected the Mercedes to come across the line so close together, followed by Oscar Piastri, and also for Charles Leclerc to do as well as he did. Max Verstappen extended his championship lead over his rival Lando Norris after taking that 10-place grid penalty. He would have snapped your hand off for that before this weekend. And, well, Lewis Hamilton has and is your eventual winner of the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. His second win this year in Mercedes. It's taken him a couple of years to get that first win since 2021, and then it only took him a couple of races later to get another one. So yes, what a race. Lots to talk about, lots of questions to answer. So let's get to it, shall we? So our first question is from TC&C and from Junior Go Mane. TC&C asks, why didn't Mercedes work out that one stop was the optimal strategy so they could put both drivers on the same strategy without resentment? And Junior Gomane asks, why did Merc keep calling Lewis in for new tyres when he still had enough to push? So, firstly, the optimal strategy wasn't the one stop today. It just wasn't. No team in that top four teams, Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes, consciously made that decision on the pit wall to go to the one stop. It was George Russell who decided to call that one stop on the circuit. And, well, personally, that was just a shot in the dark from George Russell. That there was no methodical thinking from him. It was purely the fact of it. He was out of position from qualifying. He had clean air ahead of him, and he thought, yeah, you know what have I got to lose? I will just do the one stop, and look, if I definitely make a second stop, I'm definitely going to be behind the likes of Verstappen and Norris, most likely, or at least in that fight. If I stay out there and I've got track position, I may get fortunate with a safety car, a red flag, who knows? And look, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to hold on to a podium position, etc. So he was more likely to gain from the one stop, but it wasn't the optional strategy. As history dictates at Spa, it's quite easy to overtake. The tyres fall off quite quickly. It's always been a high tyre deg or high degradation circuit at Spa. So having having older tyres compared to your competitors is always a severe detriment to yourself in your race. However, this race was a very different race to what we usually expect at Spa, because the DRS was shortened by 75 meters, and combined with the dirty air, which was more prevalent this year, and seems to be getting more prevalent as these regs go on, which is not good for us fans wanting more wheel-to-wheel racing, meant that it was very difficult to overtake. So the idea to reduce the DRS was to promote more wheel-to-wheel racing so that drivers would be not breezing past down the Kemmel Straight and into turn 5, the La Source, before the corner, but to promote more wheel-to-wheel racing so that they would be approaching turn 5 more side by side. But that wasn't the case because drivers were struggling to get the traction with the dirty air out of turn 1. So the optimal strategy was still the two-stopper. All of the data pointed to it. There was a lot of tyre degradation on the dry running that we had in practice on the Friday. Christian Horner even stated that they saw so much degradation on the Friday that, look, the one stop was just never going to be viable. They had the wrong tyre allocations anyway, but he understood why there was so much rubber that fell off of George's tyres at the end, which resulted in his disqualification, which we will get to. So while Lewis presented, as he is indicated in post-race interviews, that He wanted the one stop to his team. They rebuffed him and said, no, we're sticking to the two stop. And that's why they kept him to the two stop within the race, because they covered the undercut of Charles Leclerc correctly and the undercut from Oscar, or the overcut from Oscar Piastri, and they did the right thing. No one, and I tell you, no one on the pit wall from any team predicted that George Russell would, one, be able to take those hard compound tyres into the mid-30s in regards to distance, let alone defend from Lewis Hamilton, who had 16 lap younger, fresher tyres than his teammate. There is no way that they would have predicted that Lewis would struggle to get past his teammate, but that is what we saw because of the dirty air and because of the reduced distance of the DRS zone, and that's why overtaking was difficult. Verstappen struggled to overtake, Norris struggled to overtake, Piastri struggled to overtake as well. Eventually got it done on Charles Leclerc, but we saw drivers struggle and not have as much success in overtaking at Spa as we've seen in the past. And that is why Mercedes decided to keep Lewis on that two-stop strategy. George, as we've mentioned, just took a shot in the dark. What has he got to lose? He does that. He's had history of that as well when he's behind Lewis, when he has no opportunity of beating Lewis on the same strategy. He always asks for the alternate strategy, and he's got nothing to lose. What? Okay, I end up where I currently am after, but if I take a second pit stop, I'm definitely going to be where I am. I'm definitely going to be finishing, or at least struggling to get past Norris and past Verstappen. Okay, well, worst case, if I stay out here, I might benefit from something that is very fortunate. As we've seen in lower junior Formula Series as well, it's a common tactic where drivers stay out for very long and they benefit from a late safety car or a red flag, etc. And that's what he was hoping for. He didn't. I bet you, even if you ask him, he didn't expect that he would be able to defend from Lewis Hamilton on those old tyres. And I don't agree in any scenario that tyres that are 16 laps older should be able to comfortably defend from a driver in the same machinery on tyres that are 16 laps fresher. I just think there's something wrong with that, and that just clearly indicates that, one, that the DRS should have been left as it was, as it per last year, and there's something fundamentally wrong with these cars in regards to the dirty air that they're providing. But topic for another day. But yeah, I think, as I said, answering Junior's question, why did Merck keep calling Lewis in for new tyres while we still had enough to push? No one predicted that the one stop was going to work, hence why George was the only driver to do it. But look, it backfired on him because he's been disqualified now, because no one took into, and especially Mercedes in particular, didn't take into consideration the weight that would be lost from going on those hard compound tyres for as long as George did. Sticking with Mercedes, Georgian now asks, could we be seeing a rivalry at Mercedes? And Georgian also asked, do I think Lewis should have waited before announcing the Ferrari contract as it is affecting him now? So, I don't think the Ferrari contract announcement is affecting Lewis. I do think it was premature. I don't think he planned on announcing it when he did. I think it was leaked. Who knows by? I still have conspiracy theories that the announcement was leaked to detract away from the Mario Andretti refusal into F1 as an 11th team. It was just too coincidental with timing. I think someone within Formula One management leaked that. Because there's no way you would announce before a season that you were going to be leaving a team. It's normally done in the middle of a season or towards the end, so that you can focus on the season ahead and not ruin the dynamic within the team. But no, I don't think it's affecting Lewis. He won in Silverstone, of course, a great drive, and he won today. He has won today with George's disqualification. Even with George finishing the checkered flag and crossing the checkered flag first, Lewis was in complete control of that race. That was prime Lewis that we saw there. Brilliant tyre management, the tyre whisperer. And look, I don't think anyone expected to see Lewis stay out front or Charles Leclerc. I think we all expected Max and the McLarens to breeze past in dry conditions. But Lewis just managed those tyres perfectly, and it's a performance from him but we're so used to seeing and expect to see from him when these conditions and these circumstances require him to pull out this sort of performance, and he did that. So I don't think Ferrari is affecting him. I maybe the decision with George Russell on that one stop and them not allowing Lewis to go ahead of George. I said on the stream at the time that I think if Lewis was staying at Mercedes next year, I think that team order would have come in for George to give position to Lewis. But however, Toto Wolff looked visibly agitated and kind of angry after the race, which I don't know. Maybe it leans into the fact that George Russell didn't do something that he should have done. I don't know. More information to come out on that. But of course, George Russell's been disqualified, so no doubt Toto's upset with not securing a 1-2, more so than Lewis not winning the race, which he has now been promoted into. But yeah, I don't think that Ferrari contract is affecting Lewis by any means. We saw a typical performance from him that we're expected to see in these tyre management conditions. And yeah, I think he thoroughly deserved to win that race. And it was just a shot in the dark from George that strategy worked for him, and the circumstances arose that it was difficult to overtake at Spa, which historically it's never been difficult to overtake at Spa. Now, Georgian's other question is, could we be seeing a rivalry at Mercedes? Well, yes, I think we have been seeing that for a while. Since George has come into F1, or Mercedes in particular, he has made it his be-all and end-all to beat Lewis. And I get it. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you set your target to beat, firstly, your teammate, which we know is the first person you want to beat in F1 is your teammate, regardless of which team you're in, and beat a 7-time world champion and statistically the greatest of all time in F1. I get it. Why wouldn't you? If you was in George's position, you'd want to do the same as well, because it's a great benchmark for you, and you're in the same machinery as well. And you're not really going to get that opportunity again. You don't know how long that opportunity is going to be provided to you. And if you can beat him, it shows your worth as an F1 driver, regardless of how good your car is. Your true benchmark is against your teammate, and especially when it's someone who's arguably the greatest of all time. If you can beat him, happy days for you. That's a great thing to have in your CV. I'm not so sure Lewis maybe sees it the other way. I think he's a bit older. Maybe he's not as heavily into that as maybe what George is on the opposite side of the garage. But yeah, he was visibly angry today, Lewis, after the race. But that strategy wasn't put towards him. Now, in hindsight, of course, thankfully, he didn't, because he's now been promoted into the win. If he'd gone onto that one-stop strategy, he might have been in the same position as George right now and being disqualified from this race. But I understand his frustrations at the time. But the team, his side of the garage, stuck to that 2-stop. I think it was the right decision, because no one could foresee that George's strategy was going to work. But yeah, I think more so on George's side, there's a rivalry, not so much on Lewis's side. I think he's a lot more relaxed and chilled on that. However, I'm intrigued to see how the remainder of the season after the summer break plays out in that Mercedes garage, because they've quite evidently taken a step up in performance. Yes, I think they need certain conditions and circumstances for them to win. I don't think they're the fastest car outright by any means. And I still don't think they were the fastest car outright this weekend. However, they saw it across the line, and it'd be intriguing to see if they continue to make those improvements and then continue to have a potential at race wins, how that dynamic is going to play out between George and Lewis, because it's all been pretty okay for them. But when it gets out on circuit, I think Lewis, obviously George's #1 aim is just to beat Lewis, simple as. He doesn't really care about anyone else. Lewis is his sole focus. But we know that Lewis, very different when he's a little bit more G'd up, he's more confident, and he knows he can fight for wins, and he hasn't had that the past few years. Now he does. So I'm intrigued to see how the remainder of this season is going to play out. And yeah, who knows? We could be in for a great rivalry between George and Lewis. And look, there's nothing to say that that won't continue when Lewis heads over to Ferrari in that red suit next season. One more on Merc, why not? Pex BD asks, does Merc 1-2 in Spa mean they are back on top with Red Bull and McLaren, or they're still behind these two teams instead of pure pace? I briefly touched on it in the last question at the end there. They've definitely made improvements. They're not the fastest car outright. What they did do this weekend, however, at Spa is that on Friday, they had brought some updates to the car. But what they did is that they saw a return into porpoising, that terrible bouncing issue that they had in the W13 in the first year of this ground effect regulation era. And they removed it. They went back to the old floor spec, and well, it was a decision that definitely benefited them because, wow, Lewis qualified in P3, of course, in conditions that he thrives in, and the race today, it allowed Lewis to perfectly manage those tyres. If he was in a car that was porpoising, there's no way that he would have been able to have managed the tyres and control that race in the way that he did. And for George as well, barring the disqualification, be able to make that one stop work for the most part. So I still think Red Bull and McLaren are the quickest teams. I think we all expected McLaren and Red Bull to make more progression than they did in this race. But of course, dirty air was more prevalent. The DRS didn't help as well. But it was interesting to see that the Mercedes and the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc were able to hold off the McLaren of Piastri, the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, the McLaren of Norris at the end, and they weren't just easily able to breeze past, which just shows that it is so close now and a lot closer than it's ever been at the top 4 teams, and it's brilliant for F1. So yes, I still expect when we head to Zandvoort or head to Monza after the summer break that Red Bull and McLaren will still be the 2 teams that we expect to be on the front row or fighting for the podium positions, especially in Max's hands. Of course, Perez is another situation entirely. Who knows if he's going to be in that seat alongside Max after the summer break. But yes, I think Merc are improving. I think quite evidently they are the 3rd fastest car on the grid. They still have a little bit to go in outright pure pace to the Red Bull and the McLaren. We saw the pace of Oscar Piastri when he was in clean air. It was much faster than the McLaren, than the Mercedes and the Ferrari. But look, pure pace doesn't always mean that you're going to win a race. There's so many variables that you have to take in consideration and have to see yourself through and adjust to during the course of an F1 weekend and a race. And yeah, fair play to Merc for putting it up there where they are. Not going to say they're going to win every single race, of course, to the end of the season, but it's great to see that no one team is purely dominant at the moment after the severe and pure domination that we saw from Red Bull in the past few years with Max Verstappen. It's great to see 3 teams that we know or don't know are going to be out on top come every race weekend. So yeah, it's great heading into every F1 race at the moment, that's for sure. Heading to Oscar Piastri now, Lewis Karchan asks, why didn't Piastri go for a 1-stop when he was setting fastest lap with old tyres and about 3 seconds ahead of Russell? Good question. Well, once again, I think I just have to refer back to the fact that McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari, and even Mercedes didn't see the 1-stop being a viable option this weekend, even as the race progressed. Now, normally, as the race progresses, any data that the teams have gathered over the duration of the race weekend in practice sessions and qualifying, they will use and potentially change their strategy or their initial optimal strategy as the race progresses, as new information is provided to them, because you never truly know how cars and how tyres are going to react once in a pack and in dirty air. You don't really get that data in practice conditions because you're running in clean air most of the time. So I still think all of the data that McLaren had gathered throughout the course of duration of that race just pointed to them, look, we are going to go for the 2-stop. We do not see the 1-stop being viable. We are not even considering Russell as a challenge for winning this race today. Our fight is with Charles Leclerc and with Lewis Hamilton. People just disregarded George Russell entirely. I think that's pretty much it. So all the data pointed to the 2-stopper. Piastri didn't even indicate that he was going to do a 1-stop either, or from what I heard over the radio. So it's most likely something that they agreed upon before the race was the 2-stopper, and they adapt to when they're going to do an overcut or an undercut. But as I said, in previous years, the overcut would be a little bit more powerful here at Spa because having the fresher tyres at the end and the drop-off of the older tyres, that delta, that difference in tyre usage would be so important and so impactful at Spa. This year, it was just completely nullified because of the increase of the dirty air and that reduction in the DRS zone, which was just really, really strange. I'm fortunate that, or we are fortunate that we had at least a strategy element to keep us occupied, because other than that, there wasn't too much wheel-to-wheel racing and on-track overtakes. It was only if someone made a conscionable error into turn 1, which Sergio Perez did one time, which allowed Oscar Piastri or George Russell, I think it was, to get past him down into the Kemmel Straight. I think George Russell, sorry, it was, to get past Sergio Perez. And that was about it, really. Oscar Piastri had a good attack on Charles Leclerc, but for the most part, early stages of the race where the pack was really close, there wasn't too many opportunities. So, yeah, I think that's why they didn't take Piastri for the 1-stop. And look, I know it's in hindsight, but look, the disqualification has meant that Piastri finishes second rather than third. So, and beat his teammate comfortably, I will say. And while it's not particularly a question here that has been put towards me, Piastri managed this race very well today. We've been questioning his time management for some time. It's been his biggest weakness. He did well in Hungary until, of course, that unfortunate undercut from Lando Norris. He was managing the race very well. At a circuit, he even said he dramatically struggled with the previous year on tyre management. Here today, there was a point in the race where I thought, oh, he's falling back from Charles and Lewis. Is he taking too much out of his tyres? I believe it was in the middle stint. But no, he then came back strong. So I think Oscar Piastri has definitely turned a corner. I think he's got on top of his tyre management. And if I was Lando Norris, I would be a little bit worried that my teammate, who I know has some raw pace and can get very close in qualifying and even pit me in qualifying, now has the tyre management, his key weakness, under wraps. Because that was a high deg circuit here and he did very well with his tyre management and potentially could have won this race if he got past Lewis Hamilton at the end there. So yeah, Piastri, keep an eye on him for the remainder of this season, that's for sure. So moving a little bit further down the grid, Devil.cc asks, after watching the race and watching Daniel Ricciardo's pace in the RB, do I think he has done enough to get the Red Bull seat for the second half of the season? So Sergio Perez's seat, of course, is under consideration. We're going to get an answer sooner rather than later. I believe Dr. Helmut Marko was not impressed with Sergio Perez's performance today. He actually finished higher back in Hungary last week in P7 when he started lower down the grid in P16, 17 I believe it was. Today he started in P2 and he dropped down into P8. Completely mismanaged his tyres. Yes, strategy maybe not ideal. We went medium, hard, Sergio Perez, but for a driver who we are used to experiencing him be very good on the tyres throughout his career, he definitely didn't show that today. But to answer Devil's question, I do think Daniel Ricciardo had a good weekend. I think he had a good weekend in Hungary, except for the strategy. And I think today, or just this weekend in general actually, including qualifying, Daniel Ricciardo is once again let down by strategy. RB's strategy team, V-Carb, AlphaTauri, whatever you want to refer to them as, has got to be one of the worst on the grid, and I'm surprised it doesn't get more criticism because it is a midfield team, because it is the junior team of Red Bull. But if I'm Christian Horner, and I know he states that they're an independent team, but he runs that team, let's be honest with you. They changed their name to RB to be closer in relationship to the parent team. So he does run that team in effect. He is their master. I would seriously be looking at the strategy team as a whole, because Daniel Ricciardo, we know his strategy was completely ballsed up in Hungary. This time around this weekend, his qualifying was ballsed up. They let him go out too early. He would have comfortably, I believe, made it into Q3, if not for them sending him out too early. As we saw with a number of drivers going out later, they improved their lap times and they got through to Q3. I think he could have done for definite. And then he starts on the soft compound tyre today. I would love to know the thinking from RB in regards to starting Daniel Ricciardo on the soft compound tyre today. That tyre, anyone could have told you, was not going to last, and its peak performance was literally going to be for a couple of laps. I don't know what they were trying to gain from that. Were they thinking Daniel Ricciardo would gain a few positions with the extra grip, and then there potentially would be incidents, safety cars, a red flag, and he would be able to get a free pit stop, a free tyre change? I don't know. I can't tell you, because it just didn't make sense. However, Daniel Ricciardo, being on the run of form that he is at the moment, still nearly scored points today. He finished a couple of seconds behind Esteban Ocon, who has had a great weekend after announcing his move to Haas. Finished in P10. Daniel Ricciardo finished in 11th, and he did a mighty good job. Of course, Yuki Tsunoda, unfortunate with his engine penalty, was always on the back foot this weekend, and is a weekend to forget from him. But Daniel Ricciardo, I do think he's done enough to get alongside Sergio Perez. I still personally think it should be Yuki Tsunoda. However, we know, as Yuki Tsunoda has even been quoted as saying, there is more that Red Bull is looking at than just pure pace alone to go alongside Max in that second Red Bull seat. And well, one is the relationship with Max, which we know Daniel Ricciardo has. There have been numerous social media, TikTok style videos, those fun videos that they do before a race, the question and A things, have I, never have I ever, etc. But Daniel Ricciardo did alongside Max Verstappen, which I found very odd and should be done alongside his teammate Sergio Perez, which for me indicates, I think a decision has already been made that Daniel Ricciardo will be promoted to that seat. I could still be wrong, as Liam Lawson is still highly rumoured to be put alongside Max Verstappen, but we will see. I'm sure we won't have to wait long for it. But Daniel Ricciardo, there's the relationship he has with Max. I think he will have the pace in that Red Bull car to improve definitely on what Sergio Perez is doing. I don't think he'll be as quick as Max, but I think he'll be a definite improvement. It's not hard to be a big improvement on Sergio Perez. And third and lastly, Daniel Ricciardo is much more commercially viable than Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda. He is very well liked across the world. He'll sell a lot of merch. And look, that is something, and one of the reasons why Sergio Perez is still at Red Bull is because of how much money he brings via sponsors and merch sales to the team. If they get rid of Sergio Perez, they need someone to soften that blow. And Daniel Ricciardo is definitely the driver to soften that blow. As much as I like Liam Lawson, as much as I like Yuki Tsunoda, and I want to see both of them given an opportunity in that top seat, from a business perspective and from keeping your number one driver happy perspective, Daniel Ricciardo is the right option, and he's putting in the performances that at least show, I believe that he would do a much better job than Sergio Perez. So, Taco asks... So, Taco Play 91, a mod of our channel, asks, do you think McLaren are more focused on winning the Constructors' Championship rather than getting Lando the Drivers' Championship? Because today, Lando got an offset on his first stop to everyone else, and maybe could have tried to do something different and roll the dice, take a risk, like the one stop. Or have McLaren just said, okay, and are bagging the Constructor points? So, I don't think McLaren are just accepting the Constructors' Championship as their sole focus. I think they do want Lando to go for the World Championship or Drivers' World Championship if it is available to them. However, today, the offset of Lando Norris, so Lando running longer on his first stint to have fresher tyres at the end of the race, which in the end we knew was not effective because of how difficult it was to overtake with the reduced DRS zone and the effectiveness of the dirty air. The primary reason why McLaren went into that strategy of offsetting Lando and making him run longer on his first stint was because Lando ballsed up his start again. There's no other way to sugarcoat it. It wasn't this time due to a malfunction in his upshifts or him bogging down at the start. No, Lando Norris just gave too much room to his teammate on the inside, which then subsequently meant he understeered to the outside of turn 1, La Source, and well, turn 1 at Spa now no longer has concrete runoff, so he can keep his foot in it and maintain his speed. No, there is a considerable amount of gravel on the outside now, and Lando dipped a couple of wheels into that gravel and it dramatically slowed him down. He lost a few positions at the start, 3 places I believe it was. He did regain one of them back pretty quickly, but then he was completely out of position. We saw as the race progressed how difficult it was to overtake, and McLaren had to try something different to regain those positions. The undercut, he missed the opportunity to do. In hindsight, the undercut was more powerful than the overcut, but I think McLaren made the right decisions in the first stint. It didn't work out for them, but then they should have tried to undercut with that extra set of hard tyres compared to Max Verstappen with only a medium set. They should have adapted and changed to the undercut with the hard compound tyre that they had available and get ahead of Max Verstappen, because I don't think Max would have got past Lando. As we found out, once Max Verstappen caught up to Lando in that first stint, Max just couldn't get past because he was running a little bit more downforce, and as we said, the DRS wasn't as effective and the dirty air. So McLaren, other than giving Lando that undercut in the second stint, they tried. They tried to give Lando the best opportunity they could to recover his race and finish as high up as possible. I do think they want Lando to win the Drivers' World Championship. Yes, last week at Hungary was unique circumstances. I think if it wasn't Oscar's first win in F1, they probably would have asked Oscar or owned up to it and given Lando the win, or made Lando retain the position, or something of the like, you know, given Lando the win. But what has happened this weekend is just another example of Lando Norris throwing away a decent result on the first corner. Simple as, really, on the first lap. He's got no one else to blame but himself. Yes, McLaren can try and help their driver recover the race, but Lando needs to sort out his starts. He cannot win a World Drivers' Championship if he is not able to be in the same position down into turn 1 or at the end of lap 1 where he started. Simple as. He is ruining too many of his races. His last 6 races he has ruined because of his first lap and his start. Simple as. It's not acceptable, and I think Max now, he's extended his lead. He finished a position ahead of Lando. Happy days. He might not have finished on the podium. He didn't win, but Max would have snapped your hand off if you said to him, you'll extend your championship lead after taking a 10-place grid penalty today, regardless of where you finish. He would have taken your hand off for that, because that is the ultimate goal for Max. Of course he wants to win races, but The ultimate goal was to win the championship, and yeah, Lando wasn't able to get past him. So I do think they've still got enough to win the Constructors. I don't think they're prioritising the Constructors World Championship. I do think they made the wrong decision to maybe not undercut Max in the second stint, after seeing that just the lap times weren't working or the overtaking was difficult. But yes, McLaren, I think Lando now is in a precarious position because he heads into the summer break more points behind Max than he was expecting to after a grid place penalty. Lando, no doubt, is going to have to take the same penalty at some point throughout the course of this season. And his teammate, as we've mentioned already, Oscar Piastri, looks like he has overcome the weakness that was tyre management. And I do think that if this is something that Oscar has got a handle under, or a handle of, I do think Oscar is going to take more points off of Lando for this Drivers' World Championship, and Oscar could genuinely finish ahead of Lando before the end of the season. I predicted at the start of the season that Oscar Piastri would finish ahead of Lando Norris in the World Championship. I thought that was a poor call at the start of this season, but halfway through, I'm now thinking that we might see a very strong end to the season for Oscar Piastri, and Lando really needs to dig deep out of this rut that he's in at the moment, because yeah, he arguably should have at least won or finished a lot higher up in the past 5-6 races than he has done, and he's only got himself to blame for that, in my personal opinion. And that is it for all the questions this week, guys. Not really anything relevant to speak about in the lower half of the standings, as no one really did anything of note over the course of the weekend. Haas had a pretty poor weekend. Zhou Guanyu really struggling this year. Logan Sargent once again struggling to really make up any positions. Yuki Tsunoda, a race to forget for him, of course, with that 10-place grid or 60-place grid penalty, apologies, with the new engine unit that he took. So, but further up the grid, it is really hotting up, guys. We're heading into every race weekend not knowing who is going to come out on top, and I am absolutely loving it, and I hope you guys are too. We head to Zandvoort, the Dutch Grand Prix, next time out after the summer break, 3 weeks' time. No doubt the summer break is still going to be very busy. I'll be keeping the content coming your way. We still have a lot of questions that need to be answered. Who is going to replace Logan Sargent in that Williams seat? Who is going to replace Ocon in that Alpine seat? Where is Carlos Sainz going to go? And is Sergio Perez still going to be in that second Red Bull seat come the end of the summer break when we head to Zandvoort in 3 weeks' time? I'm loving F1 at the moment. I'm sure you guys are too. And, well, I didn't expect this season at the start, so I am pleasantly surprised. I'm enjoying it. I hope you guys are too. Join us for our wash along when we head to Zandvoort, and yes, I'll be keeping the content definitely coming at you. So hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on. Thank you for your questions, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye.